Hello everyone, Voodoo here, and today I'm here to talk about meta, so to speak. Not metamorphosis, the meta in WoW. So today we're talking about Havoc viability. This has kind of come around because of the break the meta event that Radar was putting forward, which has not included Havoc. So I figured, you know what? Let's take a look at the raid meta, at the Mythic Plus meta, and see, is Havoc even actually good right now? Like, we didn't get any buffs, we're not in break the meta. Let's see. So before we begin, like, comment, subscribe. Liking is a free way of helping support me. It's huge for me, helping the channel grow. Like the video on any content creator you like watching. It really helps push the videos out to more people. And with that, get on to it. All right, everybody. So we're going to start off with raid, because I think it's a very easy way to paint a picture here about how Havoc's doing. So this is 2 weeks now, I think, since the last buffs that came through. I believe that's kind of what this modifier is. By the way, shamans and rogues really eaten. I just noticed all three rogue specs are in like the top 6 or 7 or 8 or whatever, and both shaman specs at the top of the meters here. So go shamans, I guess. Happy for you guys. But as we can see here, Havoc sits pretty middle of the pack on, in general, damage done to all bosses, 95th percentile. Now, the thing with looking at this kind of list, this is one of those lists that you'll see on Wowhead as like a post. That's pretty misleading, because like, this isn't really much data. It's a great way of showing a general view about how on average specs are doing in the raid. All right, generally specs at the top, you can tell how easy they're doing. Specs at the bottom, you can tell how bad they're doing. Obviously, augmentation evoker is still not great on logs as far as I'm aware, so you know, grain of salt on that one. But like overall raid health wise, if you ignore enhancement shaman, and this is on mythic, of course, elemental shaman down to affliction warlock is not like the most large swing. So it's like things are pretty well balanced. All these bad specs here, including Havoc, which is below average, I believe Beast Mastery would be in the middle, or Demonology, or like right in the average, so they're below average. But all these specs here are pretty close to each other. All these specs then start to climb up. Now, the thing that gets funny, and you look at different things. So we can look at damage to bosses. And in that category, Havoc is dead last. Woo! So Havoc's single target is the worst in the game. Now, it doesn't help that we're brought to fights to deal add damage. That's why you'll find Fury Warrior and Frost DK down here, because they're brought to fights, of course, to do damage to adds. You'll see Enhancement Shaman and Elemental Shaman drop off as well. The Rogues stay high. Arms Warrior is pretty high up there. But Havoc is dead last. We're actually below Augmentation Evoker, which is hilarious. Same with Fury. Another thing, again, is that we are brought to do fights to do damage to adds. So, you know, not the craziest thing around. But let's look at individual bosses. So we're going to start with the hard bosses, right? Queen Anseric and Silken Court. So on Silken, Havoc's the worst spec in the game. Just bar none. We're not even that close. I guess Unholy is not that far ahead of us, but Fury is a good sizable 100,000 DPS ahead of us. And the best specs, Warlocks, are almost 1 million DPS ahead of us. I believe they are 600,000 DPS ahead. So the reason Havoc's bad here is because the fight doesn't really play well to Havoc's strengths. Havoc's really good at large uncapped AoE burst fights that line up on your CDs. Our 2 target is basically non-existent because of that because of just all of our damage being Demon Surge, and Demon Surge not really doing cleave. It's just uncapped burst AoE, and that's it. And also this fight, Havoc's just aren't really specs that are put on the blue side as often, so that you can deal damage to those adds. And the burst stamps are just weird. They're too short to really do Havoc's burst into it. So Silken Court, not great. Queen Anseric, though, also kind of not great. Now you're thinking, but Havoc's really good in this fight, and we're okay on this fight. We have a lot of really high AoE burst damage, but we only have it every so often, right? And we only have it like doesn't last long enough normally to do damage to the adds in this fight. So whenever we do blow up all the adds, right, like Fury Warrior is really good at dealing damage to adds, Survival Hunter is really good at dealing damage to adds, same with both Shaman specs, the Mage specs, really good like on-demand burst. Every single platform they have damage, every single bug spawn in P3 they have damage. Havoc's on their hand, not as much. As well, there's also the weird little caveat of padding on the roots. I don't believe they're removed in this thing. But yeah, we're still pretty healthy in representation with 900. Now again, every fight basically had a Havoc in it. So the buff kind of does this. So I'm not really going to factor that in too much. You can see like we're about on par with Frost DK, who I would say is a much better spec as they can't die, although they are doing less damage. But Havoc, okay on this fight. What about the rest of them? Ulgrax, we are pretty good because it is literally just AoE pad. You just pop meta in the intermission, blow up. Same with Bloodbound Horror. Actually, Bloodbound Horror is not as good as I thought. This is happening because fights are being pushed down. We're only getting like 1 or 2 metas. And this is making it so that our AoE damage in the ads is less good, which is where we're going to do a lot of our damage here. Something like Sikrin, we are horrible. We are the second worst spec in the game. Frost, not doing great here, but the thing there is that DKs can always spec up into Unholy. Not better by a large mean, but still better than single target, right? That's kind of the thing. Awesome Windwalker, Shadow, we're all down here. We can't really respec to a higher one. Fury can go Arms. Affliction can go Destruction. Frost can even go Unholy, but like at that point, it's like whatever, right? Rashinon, really good because again, uncapped AoE and all the small ads. Fear Warrior, even better because it just fits so well in their fight profile. Ovanax, AoE fight, we're good at it. Kaibeza, worst spec in the game at it. And yeah, so that kind of paints the picture, right? On those fights where we can do a ton of AoE ad damage, Havoc is really good. We're really good at padding, right? Burst AoE phases where we can meta onto a ton of ads and just demon surge them all. We are great because that is just kind of generally how our builds work. We have a ton of free cleave while keeping our single target because our single target build has so much cleave, right? Like a lot of the builds, I think on Brood Twist you're starting to see some Fel Barrage now, but a lot of the builds even here have really good single target damage. I wonder how damage the boss is here. Never mind, I lied. Not great. I guess better than Fury or Balanced Druid, but we don't sacrifice a ton to be able to still do pretty good boss damage, which is good there. So, you know, we're like on par. We're not crazy out in the middle of nowhere. Not crazy behind everything. But you add in all the free free cleave we do a lot more. So that's why you're seeing us kind of in the middle overall. We are the worst single target spec in the game, but we have great uncapped AoE every 42 minutes. Not 42, 40 seconds to 2 minutes. So that's Havoc's place in Raid. Let's talk about Mythic Plus. All right, so here we are in Raider.io, and obviously it's kind of tough to look at like a bit of a meta in terms of like Mythic Plus because there's just so many different things. Obviously you can see what's being played at the top meters here, which is often Og, Enhancement Shaman, and probably Frost Death Knight, but you see some other stuff as well. Ass Rogue, you see Balance Druid with Dorky, Frost Mage, another Balance Druid here. So there's a little bit of variation there, but generally it's Enhancement Shaman, Augmentation Evoker, Frost DK, with some other variation there. Tanks is all Prop Paladins, healers is all Discipline Priests with like shout out to this random monk. And that's kind of the meta at the top of the heap. Havoc itself does not make up a large share of the overall meta here. So we're roughly at like the 2.3 range, roughly in line with like Mistweaver monks or so, with 756,000. Yeah, I'd say we're roughly at like 2.3% of all classes, specs, everything that have ran Mythic Plus this year, this season, which is pretty bad. Historically, we're actually a lot higher. If you look at DPS, through all levels, Havoc makes up 3.9%, which is like not horrible. Obviously, Red Paladin's up here doing 13%. So, you know, you look at Red Paladin and you're like, wow, that is a lot of players playing that spec, which is kind of always the case. We're definitely like in the lower quarter here. Melee DPS as well, 7.4%, pretty good, but lower than Red Paladins are a quarter of every melee who's done a key. That's crazy. But again, this is kind of towards the like every level, so down towards the more casual bend as well. If we start looking at, can I do no? So let's just look at brackets here, right? Start looking at like 7 to 9. Havoc does drop down a bit. Look at all rolls. Havoc is pretty similar. This does kind of hold true throughout it. 3.7%. So looking at 10 to 11s, Havoc's at like 3.4% of the DPS population. Down at like maybe like 2%. Yeah, roughly 2%. We're about even with Mistweaver monks again, which is kind of funny. Of the population of all rolls at 10 to 11, and then we go higher. When we go higher, oh boy, do we drop off a cliff. We jump up from a 10 to an 11 to a 12. Havoc's jump down from roughly 2% of the share, like that, down to below, I believe it's like 1%. We're at 9,000. So we're about even with Windwalker monks. I don't even know what that would be in this. Holy Paladins are like, we're like 1%. So we're 1% of all specs. We go to DPS, 1.7%, melee DPS, 2.9%. So we fall off a cliff. As soon as you hit 12, Havoc becomes the third lowest represented melee spec, and the like second lowest represented DPS spec, with only Windwalker monks having less than us. So Havoc's not great in Mythic Plus right now. We are not being brought. No one's really playing it, which I guess kind of makes sense. Higher up we go, the more we fall off. 1% of 13s and ups is done by Havoc Demon Hunters, about even with Windwalker monks, and again, you know, even less when you look at everything, of course. Vengeance not doing great either, but that's just because Prop Paladin is so crazy. 1.8% of melee, so Feral's holding on. We go higher and higher, Havoc will drop off more. 0.6%, and then I don't even think there's like 76 who've done 15 or up. And at this point, we're getting 0.3. So this is where the meta kind of starts to solidify, and you see Aug enhancement and Frost as kind of the generic comp, with Havoc being pretty low down here. 0.6% of melees. I guess we're not, who cares about ranged, but we are down here with Windwalker Monks and Feral Druids in terms of our total specialization outputs, which is not a great place to be. Historically, these three specs, I mean, Feral Druid is historically a very underplayed spec. Windwalker is not a historically very played spec unless it's like super popular. They're just, you know, most people play Boomy instead, which shows with so many more Boomkins. But yeah, Havoc through most levels above a 10 is not really that well represented, which makes sense if you think about it, right? Havoc's strengths right now are pretty strong burst damage every 2 minutes. The issue with that is that your burst damage, while strong, is not even anywhere like close to some of the top specs. Enhancement Shamans will gap you. A good Frost Death Knight will gap you. You're not Augmentation of Ogre, don't even try, so you don't buff your group survivability. And you're only on a hard 2-minute CD, right? And you do nothing outside of your CDs. You have reasonable burst every 40 seconds, but outside of that, you do like less than tank damage, whereas specs like Enhancement Shaman, Frost Death Knight will do very high damage the whole time, and then they'll have huge burst windows, which will rival yours or even top yours. So Havoc's profile, while bursty, is just the gap between those bursts is so negative that, like, while you can do decent damage if you pull around it, it's not really worth it to pull around you when there are better specs around that can just do better things, have more utility, and also just be tankier. Havoc's really squishy these days. Fellsguard itself provides not really anything against one-shots. We have the 5% stagger that sometimes doesn't even work, which is oddly enough. So we have that 5% stagger, but on top of that, like, we just only have blur. Havoc dies, like, you need like Netherwalk to live like a frontal from Necrotic Wake on like a 13-14. An undergeared Frost Death Knight can live that with almost nothing at a higher key level, right? So there is this solution going Eldrachi, but then your damage falls off a cliff just for a 10% DR that might not even really matter that much in the long run. So Havoc's damage is okay, but it's kind of their survivability and their tankiness that holds them back right now, and showing that, you know, above a 10, they drop off the face of the earth and just really disappear. But because Havoc's so popular at lower levels, because every guild basically has to have a Havoc, those Havocs need to run 10s for keys, you're still seeing a decent population at 10s, 10s and below. Obviously, it's a very casual, friendly spec as well, with people just kind of loving demon form and stuff. And that leads us to Break the Meta. Break the Meta is this thing where the Radio runs, where they take classes that are underrepresented and do that as like an off-meta competition. You can even win but you can earn the banner that Blizzard puts out for like esports competitions every season. And Havoc's not here. Now, as a Havoc player, and as most people in the Havoc community, Havoc probably should be here. The reason they're not showing it, and they even show down here that Havoc only makes up 1.3% of the meta at 12s and up, is that they like to take the most represented classes from like a 5 and up. And because Havoc is so like popular at lower key levels, even though it's not very good, it often drops out of these competitions, despite the fact that like it's not really that good. Like, you'd put Havoc in this and you probably wouldn't play it. Survival Hunter, Fire Mage, Elemental Shaman is just going to be your best comp. Probably Guardian Druid and probably Holy Paladin as your tank healer. Even Mistweaver, I doubt it. But like, you're not even going to really play Havoc if you're trying to do the best you can with this. Stuff like Elemental Shaman makes it, which has 11.7%, and they do talk about it. They're like, oh, you know, both of them are really good, and we don't want to not include class. Well, they have done that before, where Vengeance and Havoc were both excluded from season 3, I believe, of Break the Meta. But Shamans get a pass for that because obviously Shamans are beloved and Shamans are perfect, and they just got to rework. So I take, you know, insult that Havoc's left off this. Survival Hunter's here. Survival Hunter's really, really good. Fire Mage just got buffed up. They're very good. Elemental Shaman's insane. The tank situation with Guardian Druid's great. I mean, obviously Prop Paladin is so dominant right now. Same with Holy Paladin. But, you know, it's a bad taste in your mouth when the 1.3% spec was left off, but some stuff like the 1.9%, the 1.1s, whatever, I think actually this one's not allowed, but 0.8% for fire, they're all allowed. So, you know, it's kind of a bad decision on Red Arrow's part, I believe, because, you know, basically Havocs can't play this at all. I guess Reds can't either, but you know what? You brought that upon yourself by being 12% of the meta. So it sucks. It's a bad feeling. We're not even that good. No one's really playing us, but you can't do break the meta. We're too strong for that. So there you go. That's just kind of my little video to say about how Havoc's doing. Not great. Obviously, I did a whole series talking about the changes I want for Havoc Demon Hunter. We're not in a great spot right now. We're okay in Raid. We're okay in Mythic Plus, but there's a large stigma around us, which is pretty fair. Pretty tough in terms of like rotational stuff. Our profile isn't great. Our single target is horrible. We lose a lot of single target damage in our Mythic Plus build as well. So not great outlook, but here's hoping for better. So just want to go through and do that kind of because of the break the meta stuff, kind of because of the questions I've got. If you're still watching, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Like, liking the video is such a huge thing. It really helps out. I appreciate everybody liking my last one. It really honestly made a pretty big difference. So thank you all for that. And yeah, I will see you guys next time. Peace. A big thank you to all of my channel members. Thank you to Zooligan, rpalms46, Fear Redefined, Justin Penny, Callum Price, Gabrielle Correa, Magicman 133, Falafador and Dark Terror, Sky Elk, and Brad Wisniak. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel a little bit, consider becoming a channel member down below. And just thanks for watching my videos, everybody. Even if you don't become a channel member, you're still supporting me. So thanks, everybody. See you guys next time. Peace.